Well, like I said, welcome to our first Zoom meeting for EDL 710. Tonight we're going to try to accomplish a couple of things. Number one, I want you guys to introduce yourselves to each other. Some of you I know have had class together before, but we also have some people that are new to us. And we're going to talk a little bit too about where everybody works and what you do. And then specifically, we're going to walk through what it means to unpack standards and how you go about doing that. So I think everybody knows I'm Tracy Johnson, and I am the instructor for this course. So welcome. I'm glad to see everybody. And we'll just kind of go around. So just chime in and tell us your name, where you work, and what you do. Okay? So who wants to start?
I can start.
Okay.
My name is Joseph Harrington. I am from Bossier City. I grew up outside of Monroe, and I'm currently the assistant principal of Pathways in Education. That we have two non-traditional public charter high schools in the Caddo Parish, and I deal a lot with accountability, a little bit of like student discipline, parent relations, that sort of thing. And this is my second class to have with Miss Tracy, and take a breath. It's all right. She's a really good teacher. She'll just do the work she assigns you, and you'll be all right.
Thanks, Joseph. I'll send you that check here in a little while. Okay, who wants to go next?
I'm Joey Miller.
Hey, Joey.
I'm from Red River Parish. I teach at Springville Career Center, which is our alternative school, and I'm the expulsion coordinator. So I get all the kids that are expelled from the main campus. But I think I kind of have a bluff in on them, as I've been the chief of police here for about 6 years, I guess. So that helps a lot. This is winding down to this degree. Happy about that, and just trying to enjoy this road.
Great. Thanks, Joey. Who else?
I'll go next.
Okay, thanks, Erin.
Erin Christian, work in St. Charles Parish, around Luling, Louisiana. I'm a counselor, a part of the administrative team at the high school, and wanting to expand knowledge on educational leadership.
Great. Welcome. Glad to have you.
I'll go next.
Okay. Hey.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. I'm Rachel Richard. I live in Lauderdale, Louisiana, teach in St. Landry Parish. I teach 8th grade ELA. This is my 27th year in teaching, my second class in my master's, and just happy to be here.
Well, great. Welcome. We're glad to have you. Okay, who's next?
I'll go next. Oh, I'm sorry. You can go.
Hi, I'm Shamir Murphy. I teach 1st grade in St. Landry Parish. I'm Rachel's neighbor. I live in a little town called Prairie Rome, Louisiana.
Oh, okay.
And I teach in Opelousas. I've been teaching for 24 years, and I decided that it was time to sharpen my saw with educational leadership.
Awesome. Glad to have you.
Hey.
Hi.
I'm Anthea Cummerdale, and I teach also in St. Charles Parish at a middle school at J.B. Martin. I teach 7th grade ELA, and I am a developmental designs facilitator as well. I help with advisories and responsive classrooms. And this is my, and this is one of my first courses for my master's. So I'm a little nervous and excited all at the same time. So it's nice to meet all of you.
Well, we are very glad to have you, and I promise I'll live up to Joseph's recommendation. I'm not too terribly hard. At least I hope not.
I've enjoyed having you so far.
Well, thank you.
I'm Alicia Girls. I teach in Bossier Parish at Benton High School. I've been teaching for 14 years. I actually started my first year at Red River High School. I think there was a young man who introduced himself a while ago and said he worked there. So that's where I actually started. But we live in Benton now, and I teach at Benton High School. So.
Great. Thank you. You're just down the road.
I'll go next.
Okay.
I'm George Wirtz. I reside in Deming, New Mexico. I'm in my 23rd year of teaching. I've taught wood shop and construction for that whole time, and I'm currently doing some interning with our district's construction department, and that's kind of where I want to end up.
Awesome. Glad to have you. So somebody that's not from Louisiana, yay. Okay, who else?
I'm Sarah Aubin. I'm from, Fort Worth, Texas, and I work
Texan.
Yes, I work in Northwest ISD, and I teach kindergarten.
Great, welcome. I used to live in Flower Mound, so we were just down the road when I lived in Texas. Okay.
Excuse me for interrupting you.
Yeah.
I'm Stacy Robinson. I'm sorry, I'm from Louisiana too. I live in Bossier City, and I teach down the road from Dr. Johnson, or soon to be Dr. Johnson, at UC Lewis. But this year I'm on sabbatical, and I'm trying to get my master's done by May. So I'm excited to have another class, and I was nervous too, but it really isn't as bad as you think it's going to be, maybe. Yeah, everybody agree with that?
Thanks, Stacey. Okay, let's see who else we've got.
My name's Richard Hill. I live in Kenner, Louisiana, right outside of New Orleans, and I am the Dean of Students at St. Catherine of Siena Catholic School, which is the largest elementary middle school in the Archdiocese of New Orleans. So my responsibilities at school, I'm the school disciplinarian. I run our one-to-one technology program in our middle school, and I'm in charge of logistics on campus as well.
Busy man, lots to do. Glad to have you, Richard. Okay, I think we've got maybe 3 or 4 more.
Hear me?
Yeah, John, we can hear you. Just speak up a little bit, maybe.
My name is John Guillory. I also teach in St. Andrew Parish. I've been teaching for 8.5 years, soon to be 9.5 at the end of in May. I've been at Lawtell for past 5-6 years. I teach 3rd grade ELA. I also help coach. I'm the head girls basketball coach my first time this year, and I've been assistant coaching with football since I got there in 2012.
Great, welcome. Glad to have you. Okay, so let's see. I don't think we've heard from Sonia and Kevin. So Kevin, you want to go next?
Yeah, hello, I'm Kevin Coogan. I'm from Orlando, Florida. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm from Orlando, Florida. I teach in East Baton Rouge Parish, health and PE middle school.
Awesome. Middle school. I'm always impressed with anybody that teaches middle school by choice. I never taught middle school. I was a middle school principal for 3 years and feel like I did my time and could not wait to go to high school. So appreciate you middle school people. Okay, Sonia, I think you're it. You're the last one. Okay, I'm not sure. Sonia, can you hear me okay? Yeah, there you go. Okay, we can't hear you. Yeah, you've unmuted your mic. You're okay with that, but like I said, we just can't hear, so. It's okay, Sonia, if you want to, if you go to the bottom of the screen, you'll see a chat feature. If you want to just type a message in there, then we'll know who you are, okay? Well, tonight, like I said, I wanted to talk to you guys about EDL 710 and what we're going to be doing and hoping to accomplish in the course. And then specifically, we're going to work tonight on unpacking the standard. So one of the things that I always want to start with a new class is for you guys to really hopefully understand what it is I expect and how I kind of do things. So, first of all, please call me Tracy. We're all adults here, and, it doesn't need to be Mr. or Miss or, whatever. Just, like I said, very informal. Also, too, I try to be very available to you guys, but my job role at LSUS is actually changing. So I went from being the advisor for the Educational Leadership Program and the curriculum instruction to adding, they've taken the MEDCI and given that to the program director, but now I'm doing the Masters of Health Administration, Masters of Public Health, the doctoral program, the SSP, and the MSc. So And in addition to that, I'm also working on several grants for the university and a couple of other things. So like I said, if I don't respond immediately, I'm not ignoring you. Like I said, my plate's just pretty full right now, but that's okay. I'd rather be busy than not. But if you do need me, the best way to get me usually is going to be via email. I'm not always in my office, but if you do call my office, I'll either answer or return your call. And if you need me, you're welcome to contact me on my cell phone. Just text me first so that I know who it is, and I'll call you right back so we can talk. But I get a lot of just very random calls, and so I don't always answer my phone. Or a lot of times I'm in a meeting or something where I can't answer right now. But especially like I said, if you're working on an assignment or you have a question or something comes up, don't hesitate to reach out. I really do not mind that at all. The other thing too is, I spent 35 years total in education, 4 years in private, and then 31 years in 2 different urban school districts in Texas. I just left that a year ago, and it still feels a little bit weird that every time I drive by a school, I feel a need to pull in and, go in and coach the principal, because that's what I did all the time before. So, I get it. I really do understand how crazy your lives are as teachers or assistant principals or deans or, whatever position you hold right now. So I'm not one that is going to freak out or get really upset if you miss a deadline or something like that. All I ask is that you communicate with me so I know what's going on. Some of you, this last assignment, you thought you submitted, but I don't know, something weird was going on with Moodle, and so it didn't look like it had submitted on my end. I'll try to contact you and let you know, but like I said, if you're going to be late with something, I understand, I really do. There were those days that literally the school was on fire or we had an active shooter situation. I've dealt with all that fun stuff. And so, sometimes life just happens, and it's not anything that I'm going to get too upset about. My goal for you guys in this class is I want you to be successful. I expect all of you to walk out of here with an A. You'd have to work pretty hard to screw it up that you don't get an A, quite frankly. But I also want to give you tools that you can use when you do get to that position that you aspire to, whether that is to be an assistant principal, a central office administrator, whatever. But I want to help you to fill your tool bag so that you have some things that you can actually use. There's nothing to me more frustrating than taking a college course and you walk away and you're like, yeah, that was interesting, but there's not anything you can actually take and apply. This course is designed to be something that you can literally take and apply almost instantly in your classes. The other thing too that, I'm a trained mediator as well as a trained coach, academic coach as well as instructional leadership coach. And like I said, just, relax, really and not truly. Don't freak out if something happens or, whatever. It's not a big deal. And always remember too that, as we go through this, we're all learning together. Some of you are experts at some of the things we're going to be talking about, and some of you have never looked at it or seen it before. That's okay. We're all here to learn together. Okay, so any questions before we get started about the class or how things need to be done or anything like that? Hey, Angela, I see that you're with us. You didn't get to introduce yourself. You want to do that real quick? Tell us who you are, where you work, and what you do.
Me?
Yeah. Anybody? Yeah, I've got 2 people that I've seen it. I've got 3 people, it looks like, that have joined us since we went through the introduction. So just jump in and tell us who you are.
Oh, I'm Jana Chowns, and I teach at Lee Junior High in Monroe, Louisiana, 23 years.
Hey, Jana, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay.
You as well.
And Angela, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Angel. I teach at Lodge Elementary. I'm a pre-K teacher. I've been teaching pre-K. This is my 14th year. And I'm sorry, I'm having trouble keeping my app open tonight, so I don't know what I've missed.
So far, just introduction. So, and I am recording the meeting, so you guys can always, look at it later.
Okay, I don't know what other part of the introduction I needed to do. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. That was perfect. Okay. I'm sorry, that would be my husband's cell phone that is ringing in the other room. Hang on. about that. As I said, life happens. Okay, so hopefully you guys were able to look at the PowerPoint presentation that I put together for tonight. I'm not going to read it to you. Obviously you guys can read it. But what I want us to talk specifically about is what it means to understand and to really read and be able to unpack or unwrap or, I don't know, whatever term, different authors use different terms, a standard. As you think about being an instructional leader, one of the most important things that you have to do as an instructional leader with your teachers is guide them through curricular processes. And if you don't know how to do it, it's pretty hard to teach them and lead them into doing it. So we always start with the standards, whether those are our state standards or if your state's using Common Core. Here in Louisiana, it's Louisiana Believes. If you're in Texas, it's the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. Or like I said, a lot of states are still using Common Core. But the standards are the foundation that we have to begin using when we think about curriculum planning and curriculum work with our teachers. Also, in a perfect world, the state standards are aligned with your state standards. I know, the work that I did in Texas, that there was a very tight alignment between the standards and those state tests that the students were responsible for taking every year. Hopefully that's going to be true in all cases, but if it's not, there is still a way to address that and to fix it. But tonight we're going to, like I said, talk about breaking down a standard. So in the PowerPoint, if you've got that, you may want to look at it, but I gave you different standards. So I pulled a couple from Louisiana, a grade 6 English Language Arts one, and then another Algebra 1 standard. I also pulled from Texas a science grade 2 standard. Then I went into Common Core and I pulled some that were math kindergarten. And then I also went to West Virginia and looked at their standards for social studies grade 4. And one of the things that you will notice is that the standards are written in a pretty similar fashion, whether you're talking Louisiana, Texas, Common Core, West Virginia, Florida, you name it. There is a pretty set way that standards are written. So when you have a chance, go through and look at these and make sure that you really do understand what the standard is telling us to do. The other thing that's really interesting is some of our states now are taking the standard and they're also giving you criteria for the mastery. So that's why I pulled from West Virginia, because they actually not only give you the standard, they tell you what is distinguished mastery, above mastery, mastery, partial mastery, or novice. Other states don't necessarily break out the standards, but when students take the state assessment, depending on how well they do, they can get a different ranking or rating on the state assessment. So it may be something like distinguished or advanced or college ready or whatever. But in this day and age, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your perspective, those state assessments are pretty important and certainly help us to determine how well schools are doing from at least an academic achievement perspective. And in many cases, the tests do determine whether or not students are promoted to the next grade or if they receive their high school diplomas. I could talk all day about why I think standardized testing is being overused. And oftentimes the results are, somewhat abused in the way that they are communicated. But the reality is I don't see this accountability movement going anywhere, at least for a while. I wish I could tell you differently. So what I want you to do first is I'm going to ask you a series of 4 questions. And you're going to hold up a finger, like 1, 2, 3, or 4. Please don't hold up any bad fingers. Because I want to get a sense of how familiar you are with standards. Okay, so here's your options to the question. Let me kind of back up here. The question is, how familiar are you with unpacking standards and applying your knowledge to create learning targets? So, number 1, I'm very familiar with it. In fact, I could teach others about it. So if that's how you feel, you'd show me a 1. I'm familiar enough to work alongside others. So maybe you've had some experience and you could do this pretty well in a team. That would be a 2. Number 3, I'm still learning, but I'm familiar with the process. So you kind of get it, but you still feel like you need a little more support. That would be a 3. And then number 4, I'm not at all familiar with the process. Okay, so no wrong answers. Everybody show me kind of where you are. That's going to help me. This is my formative assessment. Okay. Okay. All right, looks like pretty much everybody is either a 2 or a 4. That we didn't have any 1s or 3s, so that's okay. That's good. So I'm going to sort of take the middle road. So I won't bore those of you that are somewhat familiar and you feel like you could do it in a team. And for those of you that are not at all familiar, hopefully I'll give you enough information that you'll become comfortable with it. So when you're thinking about unpacking a standard, there are certain reasons that we want to do this. And as a leader, one of the things that I would encourage you to do is some sense making for your staff. I know the first time I mentioned when I was a principal that we were going to spend some time looking at and unpacking standards. I did in a faculty meeting. Of course, I love doing stuff like this, so I was all excited, and I got just that sort of undercurrent of a groan from everybody, like, oh yay, one of the things she's going to make us do. So one of the things that you really want to make sure, somebody may need to mute their mic, guys. I think we're getting some feedback. But anyway, it is important that you explain to teachers how to do this and why to do it. So when we unpack a standard, it makes our learning targets clear for both our teachers and our students. I also would encourage you to go ahead and share those with your parents as well, so that they know exactly what their children are going to be learning. It also develops a common understanding and expectations for our teachers and our students. It identifies the key content and skills that we need in our instruction. It helps us to determine the number of learning opportunities needed, and it helps us to decide what level of rigor to use when teaching the content. Now, before we delve further into this, I'm going to give you a big caution. One of the very well-known researchers named Bill Daggett, he says that if we were to go through most state curriculums and look at the standards, we should eliminate at least 50% of them. Because what we often do as teachers, and we're often led this way by curriculum departments as well as by our campus leadership, is that we try to teach everything. And in reality, the assessments that we're dealing with today and that our students must master, we have to get to depth and not breadth of content. So you have to become pretty picky, I guess, or pretty strong consumers when you look at standards, because there are some that you can double up, that you can bundle together, or that you maybe just need to eliminate. Because the truth of the matter is we have way more curriculum than we have the time to teach, number one. And number two, when we just skim the surface and cover, literally just cover the standards, we're not really preparing our students for what they need to know, because we have to get them to understand conceptually what's going on. And as Wiggins talks a lot about in the book, they have to be able to transfer and apply their learning. Otherwise, guys, we're wasting their time and ours too. So think about that part of this as you begin to move into it. So I'm going to read you a standard, and you tell me if you think this is a standard that we, okay, we'll do thumbs up or thumbs down on this one. Is this something we need to unpack or not? Okay, because not every standard needs to be unpacked. It can be pretty daunting if you pull up all the standards for a particular grade level and think, oh my gosh, you've got to go through and unpack all these and then map them for the curriculum and develop a unit plan, and it can seem pretty overwhelming. But there's some that are pretty straightforward. So the first one, the standard is Conventions of Standard English. Use correct capitalization. So thumbs up if it needs to be unpacked, thumbs down if it does not. Let me see a response from everybody. Okay, awesome. You guys are so smart. No, that's probably one you don't have to really spend time unpacking. It's pretty straightforward. use correct capitalization. You know, it's going to be a standard. Now, the only thing that I would caution you about, you have to think about what grade level that this is a standard for, because using correct capitalization is going to be in kindergarten. It's also going to be in first grade and second grade and third grade and fourth grade, and sometimes you'll even see it pop back up into the middle grades. Because a kindergartner is going to learn to capitalize the beginning of a sentence and the pronoun I, but a fourth grader, you're going to want them to know, you know, which proper nouns they need to capitalize and all of those instances. So while it seems straightforward, make sure you're aware too of what grade level it is. Okay, so here's the next one. Same thing, thumbs up, thumbs down. So you tell me if it's one we need to unpack or not. Determine the main idea of a text, recount the key details, and explain how they support the main idea. So thumbs up if it needs to be unpacked, thumbs down if it doesn't. Okay, you guys are awesome. I could just quit right now and we could all take an early night. Absolutely. When you have more verbiage, that's usually your first sign that it's going to need to be unpacked. But there are multiple things within this particular standard that the students are going to have to do. So you've got to break it down into component pieces. You're also going to have to think about what are those supporting standards or supporting knowledge that the students are going to need to have to be able to do this. So before you can determine the main idea of a text, you've got to have an understanding of what the main idea is and how you figure that out. So when you unpack a standard, it's not only breaking it down so you can pull it into teachable pieces and manageable learning targets, it also requires that you have an understanding of what those foundational type skills are students must possess to successfully master that. So that's when spiraling of curriculum becomes really important. Okay, we're going to do one more. This is a second grade standard. Mentally add 10 or 100 to a given number, 100 through 900, and mentally subtract 10 or 100 from a given number, 100 to 900. Thumbs up, it needs to be unpacked. Thumbs down, it doesn't. Okay, we're getting kind of a mixed response. On this one, I think you could argue pretty well either way. Technically, it doesn't need to be because it is pretty straightforward again. However, you may want to think about, because here's the difference. So if I give a student a number, let's say 100, and I say add 10, well, that's 110. That's pretty easy for most kids to do because they know how to count by tens. However, if I gave them the number 95 and I said add 10, they may not make that connection that you're not counting by tens this time, you're actually going to count by two sets of 5. Is one way to look at it mathematically. So like I said, if you said you don't need to unpack it, that's fine. But if you did say you need to unpack it, again, it goes to that supporting knowledge that kids are going to have to successfully master that. Okay? So, and that's all in the presentation for you. So the way that I go about unpacking a standard, there are 5 steps involved. And it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. And you know, the first one is you have to read the standard. I mean, that may seem really silly, but I have honestly had teachers, as I've worked with them, and I've worked with thousands of teachers in my career, who didn't read the standard. They just immediately went in and started trying to unpack it and break it apart. And I'm like, guys, you didn't even read it. You lost the context. The context in which a standard is written is as important, if not more important, than the standard itself. So for example, there is usually some sort of an introduction to almost any set of standards. Louisiana Believes has that, Texas does, etc. And in that introduction, it talks about the opportunities and the times and all of that you would need to apply the standard learning. So read the standard is very important. Also, like I said, not only that introduction, but a lot of times there are footnotes. I know in Dallas, when I was an assistant superintendent or an area superintendent, they had developed a document for us to use to help. It was part of our new evaluation system. And on every page, I'm not exaggerating, there's at least a good paragraph full of footnotes. And quite honestly, you know, natural human tendency. We sort of ignored the footnotes. Those footnotes had the most critical, important information in the entire document. And sometimes that is true with standards as well. So understand how they're put together contextually, but also see if there are other footnotes or references or charts or whatever, because that may help you a lot. The second step that you need to do is determine the ultimate target type. And what I'm talking about here is there are different kinds of standards. There are process standards, there are knowledge standards, there are product standards, there are skills standards. So you've got to identify first, what kind of a target is this? Is this a knowledge piece, just something the kids need to know? Or is there a product they're going to have to produce out of it? And the easiest way to do that is you start by looking at the verbs. So, remember how we used to, you guys are probably all too young, but some of us had to diagram sentences once upon a time. But remember back to, those basic English lessons. So you're going to go through and underline the verbs, because the verbs are the action which tell you what students are going to have to do, whether it's a verb like determine or analyze or apply. Very, very critical. Then you also need to look for the knowledge, the reasoning, the skills, performance, or the product expected. And to do that, the simplest way is to go through and circle all of the nouns, because those are going to tell you, are these skills, is there a product, etc. The third step is, and some people omit this one, but if you haven't figured it out, I'm a huge fan of Heidi Hayes Jacobs, and she is the one who came up with the concept of an essential question for teaching. I always encourage teachers to develop essential questions. So those are, some people call them the big ideas, some people just call them the target, but the whole thing behind doing essential questions is to figure out what is the main piece or thing that you're wanting your students to learn. And notice I use the word students learn as opposed to teachers teach. Because if you teach, I've had those experiences as a high school English teacher. I would give a brilliant, absolutely brilliant lecture, and then I would quiz my kids on it the next day, and they'd all fail miserably. Well, you know what? I may have thought I taught really well, but guess what? If they don't learn it and they can't apply the knowledge, then we might as well not have taught. So an essential question is not only for you, but also for your students, because it is part of that metacognitive process that really helps them to deepen their learning and for it to become more permanent in their brains. After you develop your essential questions, you're going to look for concepts or skills within the standard. And my advice is always just highlight those. And the reason that you want to do that is, in most instances, we're wanting to teach conceptually, because if students understand a concept, they can then apply it. But sometimes the standard only asks you for a skill. So what's the difference? I'm going to make it very basic and simple. So like if I were teaching in, first grade, and the standard said that students will be able to add 2 single-digit numbers. Okay, that's a skill. 1 + 1 = 2, that's a skill. However, if the standard says students will be able to use the distributive property to add multiple numbers, that's a concept. Whenever possible, remember I said that there's too many standards for us to actually get through. If you don't have time to get through all the standards, pick and choose the ones that teach conceptually. Because when kids learn concepts, they're going to be much more successful in the long term than when they just learn discrete skills. To give you an example, I was a very, quote, good math student in high school. I went through calculus, and I tutored calculus in college and all that. But I was a master at being able to take a formula and use it. But then if you give me something practical, like tell me to figure out how much tile I need to buy at Home Depot to retile my bathroom, I'm completely lost. And I will get either way too much or way too little. Because I didn't learn the concept of how to apply some of those formulas and math skills. And, we want to make sure that's not the way our kids are taught. We want them to have the real life examples. Then the last piece is, You have to also determine if there may be multiple learning targets within a standard. You know, the standards are not always single discrete pieces. They are oftentimes multiple targets within a standard. Some standards you can teach at a single lesson. There may be a standard that it's going to take you 3 weeks to get through. So if there are more than one learning target within a standard, you're going to have to break those apart and then go through the process again for each one of those components. Okay? So, as I said, there are 4 types of standards and learning targets. One is knowledge. Those are pretty straightforward and easy. Kids just need to know certain things. Reasoning, we want kids to be able to problem solve and to think through things. So reasoning standards are becoming much more prevalent when you look at curriculums from across the state and different schools. The third kind is a skill or performance. Used to be those were just seen in like fine arts or PE or something like that, but more and more as we look at standards, particularly like from the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, those coming from the science organizations, there is a skill and performance piece to it. And then the last one is a product. Products standards are usually the highest rigor type of standards and the most difficult for our students to successfully do and complete. So examples of a product, I think I put it in, I think it may be in your assignment next week, but you know, one of them was the learning target was students will read the Declaration of Independence, the Magna Carta, and selected readings from the Republic by Plato and analyze them for similarities and differences. Then they will create their own Declaration of Independence based on those learnings. Okay, very rigorous, does require some knowledge, does require a lot of reasoning and skill performance, but it's actually a product-based standard because they're creating their own piece of learning. Okay, so the other part of it too, and this happens pretty frequently, people often say, you know, gosh, we don't understand why our students are doing so poorly on, you know, X, Y, or Z. You know, a particular state assessment is usually the issue. A lot of times when we break it down, when we find the reason the kids aren't doing what they are doing as well as we want them to do is we've taught the standard at one level of rigor, but it's actually assessed on a completely different level. So that goes back to, you know, what I call observer math, you know, where the teacher, you know, dutifully shows on the whiteboard or on the overhead how to do problems, and the kids just mimic or follow that sort of formulaic teaching. But they don't know how, like I said, to apply it. It's not asked on the, you know, when you look at a state assessment in math in particular, and I've looked at pretty much all of them from at least the surrounding states, they don't get a list of addition questions, for example. It's going to be a word problem where they have to apply addition or subtraction and figure out which formula, etc., to use. So it's really important that we also look at the rigor level. And my standard rule of thumb is if the rigor level is pretty low, teach one level at least above. Okay, so, you know, Bloom's taxonomy, it's been around for 100 years, but it's still a really wonderful resource. So when Bloom says determine or identify, I would teach it at apply or higher. Because again, they're going to master the lower level skill, but if you do it in the right way, then when it is tested at a higher level, your students are going to be successful. Okay, so I'm not going to walk through all of this because you guys do have the presentation, but let's get kind of down to the meat of the process. All right, so I'm going to give you a standard. And this may be a little bit hard virtually. You know, this is where I really miss having a whiteboard that I could work on, but whatever. So here is the standard, and I want you to tell me first what the verbs are. So if you've got the presentation, this will be a lot easier for you. So here is the standard, and I'll read it a couple of times. Determine the meaning of general, academic, and domain-specific words and phrases in a text relevant to a grade 3 topic or subject areas. Okay? So determine the meaning of general, academic, and domain-specific words and phrases in a text relevant to a grade 3 topic or subject areas. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is what? We just read the statement, so what are we going to do next?
determine the type.
Okay, determine the type. Okay, so what type of standard do you think this is? Is it knowledge? Is it skills? Is it product? Or is it, which one am I forgetting all of a sudden here? Skills, products, always that second one, reasoning. If you're determining the meaning of general academic and domain-specific words and phrases in a text,
Is it reasoning?
It could be reasoning, yeah, because you're having to apply context clues and things like that. Is it, let's kind of go backwards. Is it a product? Is there a product that they're having to do? Okay, so that one we can easily eliminate. Is it knowledge? Probably not, because they're not like, it goes beyond that. So I think you could argue it's either skills or reasoning. Either one of those two work. It is a skill to determine meaning, but it also does require a lot of reasoning to do that. Okay, so after we determine the type, we identify what next?
The verbs.
The verbs. Okay, the verb's pretty easy in this one. It's the first word. What is that?
Determine.
Yeah, determine. Okay, so you would underline that. And then you would go through and identify the nouns. Okay, so we've got the nouns meaning, academic, domain, words, phrases, text. And we'll stop there. Okay, so thinking about unpacking that standard, what would be a learning target that you would want your kids to be able to do? First of all, is this something you think you could teach in a single lesson? No, probably not. What are some background or foundational skills they're going to have to do this?
I think this is a skill that would kind of get continuously taught throughout the year. You'd constantly be doing that. Could constantly be doing that.
Yeah, it is one of those cyclical skills that you need to do all the time. Absolutely. Now, before students can do this, they need to know how to use context clues. They need to know how maybe to look at root words, to use other sources of information in the text, including pictures or diagrams or charts. They also, they may be able to, depending on the learning or the assessment, they can look words up, they can use a dictionary. There's a variety of ways for them to determine the meaning of words and phrases. But yeah, this is not a standard you're going to teach one time and you're never going to come back to it. This is an ELA standard, and great ELA teachers are constantly reinforcing this particular skill. So it's not a discrete standard that you're going to, like, I'm planning my lesson today to just do this. It's more than likely, in a great teaching situation, going to be taught as part of balanced literacy time, or, I'm trying to think what else. Balanced literacy time, maybe peer reading. There's a lot of different opportunities for us to do this. But it's very important that we do understand and break it down, because it's one thing to determine the meaning of a word. It's another thing to determine the meaning of a phrase. Okay? So I had given you guys this lovely, let me take my little sticky note, this lovely little Unpacking the Standards sheet. You do not have to do anything with this right now. Next week in module, no, I'm a week ahead of myself. Module 2 is next week. Module 3, which is week after next, November the 13th, you're going to work as a group to unpack a standard using this form, okay? You'll turn in one form for the whole group. You don't have to do it by yourself, but it's pretty simple. It's like we talked about. What do students need to know and understand? List your nouns. What are the skills? List your verbs. What level of blooms do we have to go through? Learning objectives aligned to this standard. So what specific learning objectives are you going to do? And then how will you know when students know it? So how are you going to assess that mastery? Okay. Unpacking a standard is something that is the first part of unit and hopefully good lesson planning. Usually it's done in a professional learning community or a team meeting, a department meeting, something like that. If you're in a school that's pretty small and you're the only teacher of a certain subject, you may be doing this by yourself. But the more that you unpack a standard, the easier and quicker you'll get at this. It's a skill. And it does require some of your, processing and reasoning. But when you do this, you'll find writing those learning objectives or learning targets, depending on the nomenclature, your school district or school system uses, becomes pretty simple. Unfortunately, what a lot of teachers will try to do is they'll just write the whole standard, and that's, quote, the learning objective for the students. Doesn't work that way, guys. This is too complex for kids to understand. The learning objective that's aligned to that is broken down into component pieces. And as we said, you might teach it in one lesson. It may take you 2 days, 3 days, and maybe a week's lesson. It could be, like Joseph said, it's something that's a strand that runs throughout the school year. But when you break it down into component parts, too, it's a lot easier when your kids are not able to do a particular task. You can identify where the breakdown is in that foundational knowledge. So, if you've ever had kids come to your class with learning gaps and you wonder, where did this all mess up? This kind of information becomes invaluable to you as a teacher to diagnose and remediate when kids are not getting it, okay? So I just wanted to walk you through real quickly tonight, and it's not been too quick because it's 8:15, but to give you an idea of this, but we'll talk a little bit more about it. I'll actually do a video where I show you how to do this exactly using the standard, I believe in module 3. So coming up, okay? All right, so to close us out tonight, comments, questions, concerns, what's on your minds? Y'all are just like, we just want to be done. Okay, y'all are like my easiest class ever. Nobody has a question? Okay, assignments going okay? Okay. All right, just a couple of upcoming sorts of things. Like I said, this next week is pretty similar. You have a reflective question and a discussion forum. I opened up module 2 for you today. You do not have to work ahead, but I know some of you like to, so I wanted to get that out there for you. The next week in module 3, which is November the 13th, I believe, you will have a group assignment, and you will not be doing a reflective question. You're going to actually respond to a case study. And then the following week, I think we're back to reflective questions. And if you want to start thinking about the final exam, I do not give traditional type tests. You'll be asked to do something that is going to apply, hopefully, what you've learned. So, if you're one of those people that feels like you need to just cram and study, there's not a midterm, there's not a traditional final. Okay, it's really all about applying and using what you're learning, hopefully to create some tools that you can take and use in your classrooms. Okay? Okay, well, y'all are way too easy. I wish you'd challenge me a little bit more here. All right, well, we'll end a little bit early then. Y'all have a great night. Those of you that have Friday night football, I know we've got some coaches. Good luck. Hope your teams do well. And we will see you guys next week.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Bye. Good night.
Bye.